Hello everybody and welcome back, and as you can see from the title on the screen there, we're going to look at what programme learning outcomes are all about and what is international best practice in writing them. Well, programme learning outcomes are basically the learning outcomes that try to summarise and synthesise the three domains of Bloom's taxonomy: knowledge, skills and attitudes. These are the things that hopefully students who are about to embark on the course and that future employers will read and get a feeling for what the course is all about. The rules for writing programme learning outcomes are the same as those for writing learning outcomes for modules, and generally the guidance is to write between 5 and 10 learning outcomes for a programme. Now, there are two types of programme learning outcomes. The first type are the learning outcomes that you yourself have assessed in the programme over the 4 years, say, of an undergraduate programme. These are the learning outcomes for each module that each of the lecturers on the course would have assessed. The second type of programme learning outcome is often referred to as an aspirational or a desirable learning outcome. This learning outcome may or may not be assessed. It may not be capable of being assessed until after the students have actually graduated from the programme. I'll give you some examples of these in a moment to illustrate what we mean. Now, if we have a look here at the first example, these are the programme learning outcomes from the Bachelor of Science Education programme here in UCC that I am the director of. And if we look at some of the programme learning outcomes, we identify, apply, recognise, develop portfolios, evaluate theories of teaching, critically evaluate effectiveness, display willingness, foster an interest. You can see there, some of them are in the affective domain, like display willingness, and learning outcomes in the affective domain can be challenging to assess. This one is possible to assess because we can get reports from the teaching staff in the school in which our student teachers have undertaken placement. Others are very easy to assess too, like identifying the key characteristics of excellent teaching. We can assess that when we go to visit the students and when we look at their portfolios. Some of them in the psychomotor domain, laboratory organisation and management, when we see our student teachers teaching practical work to their pupils. So we have there a selection of learning outcomes which have been assessed during the programme. However, if we have a look at the last one, this one has never been assessed and could not be assessed while the students are undertaking the programme. For example, communicate effectively with the school community and with society at large in the area of science education. Now, what I'm hoping with that learning outcome is that if I was to visit that school in 5 or 10 years in which the student teacher has been teaching as a full-time teacher, that I would see that teacher encouraging and getting involved with their students, with their own students, in things like Young Scientist exhibitions, in the Sci-Fest exhibitions, in putting on displays for the community, in carrying out field work on the local ecology, for example, of their maybe woodland or hedgerows or at the seashore. So getting their own pupils involved. But I cannot assess that learning outcome. Hence, it's called an aspirational learning outcome, because it can only be assessed down the road when the students have graduated. Here's an example of an undergraduate degree in engineering, and again, you have learning outcomes which are quite straightforward to assess. This is an interesting one: work effectively as an individual in teams. So teamwork that may or may not have been assessed during the programme. So unless one were to look at the actual module descriptions, for example, are the students given a team project to carry out? And again, the communication skills, very important. Likewise, in this Master's in Computer Science degree, the sort of things you'd expect a computer scientist to be good at: solving problems. Again, look at it, working effectively as a team member. The affective domain is highlighted time and time again. And likewise, the undergraduate degree in the teaching of the language of Gaeilge, again, they're expected to display proficiency in the area of grammar, demonstrate fluency in the spoken Irish. These are all quite easy to assess. But here again, communicating effectively with the school community, very important. That would be an aspirational learning outcome. So the advice I would give you is, when writing program learning outcomes, try to range over the 3 domains that you see there on the screen: the cognitive, the skills domain, and the affective domain. And skills can be either psychomotor skills like laboratory skills, or skills in the broader sense. I'll give you some examples there. And of course, these areas overlap. For example, in training teachers, they might have the knowledge, they might have the skills, but you couldn't graduate them if they didn't have the right attitude. If, for example, they didn't have patience or empathy, that you couldn't put them in charge of young children. So you will notice from some of those examples too that it is permitted to have a number of action verbs. In fact, in writing program learning outcomes, you may have to include a number of action verbs to correctly summarize and synthesize the learning outcomes at module level. Finally, I've given here over the next few slides some sort of prompts that when you're sitting down and you have to write program learning outcomes, if you're writing them in the area of knowledge, these are some phrases you could use. If you're writing them in skills, in the broad sense, we'll be speaking later on in another presentation about what the European Qualifications Framework is, but this is skills, not just psychomotor skills, but the skill of linking theory with practice, the skill of recognizing limitations, for example, skills of problem solving, solutions to plan future developments, and so on. So there's some skills, there's more of them. Applying technical knowledge is a skill. Diagnosing problems is another skill. Developing personal capabilities, another skill, and so on. Interpreting relevant regulations, another skill. And then attitudes. These again would be examples of like embracing responsibility, displaying ethical standards, working as members of a team, and so on. There was a great piece of research done by Professor John Fitzpatrick for his Master's in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. And he looked at the introduction of learning outcomes in the Department of Process and Chemical Engineering. And in this paper, which was based on his thesis, and he collaborated with one of his colleagues, Ed Byrne, and myself in writing it. You can see there it was published in Education for Chemical Engineers. He made a very important point that program learning outcomes should be made explicit for students, for employers, for colleagues, for everyone, particularly for students, so that when students are thinking about coming and embarking on this program, the program learning outcomes will give them a very good feeling for what the program is all about. So we shouldn't bury our program learning outcomes on websites or bury them in paperwork. We should make a point of making them explicit to our students. So in summary, therefore, the rules for writing program learning outcomes are the same as those for writing module learning outcomes. Program learning outcomes do tend to be broader because you have to synthesize many module learning outcomes and try to range over the 3 domains of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And make the learning outcomes explicit to our students as they undertake the programme. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. God bless. We leave it at that.